So welcome everyone to another session of Immigrant First Investing with ALC. Gary Merson, the president of ALC, and me, Chris Mason, the chief communications officers, are joined with a special guest today that I think brings a really interesting perspective to the table. And to add to that, Benjamin who will introduce himself in just a minute, and Gary Merson actually just spent some time in China. And so we're planning to talk about that trip and what the market's showing today as we're starting to think about and approach the grandfathering deadline that's on everyone's mind in the EB-5 world. But before we jump into it, Benjamin, why don't you introduce yourself and set the stage for us here today?
Certainly. Well, thank you very much, Chris. It's an honor to be here today, and it was delightful to be able to travel around southern China with Gary Merson for a couple of weeks and bring the message about EB-5 to the Chinese market. I'm the descendant of Chinese immigrants to the US. They made their way here through a very lengthy process through EB-2, through employment visas. I, of course, was born here, so I took the shortcut. And ever since then, I've been dedicated towards helping people who want to come to the US to replicate that journey. And EB-5 is one of the ones that has the most control, the most flexibility for people and for their entire families. I've been doing EB-5 since 2012. The first case I worked on was a Chinese investor case in 2012 at a local project that's since closed here in Maryland. And from 2015 to 2018, I had the honor of working overseas in Guangzhou, China, just across the street, as it turns out, from the US consular post in Guangzhou, which at the time was responsible for the largest volume of EB-5 immigrant visa adjudications worldwide. It's still probably up there in the top few posts worldwide as well today. So since that time, I was happy to be working on about 2,080 I-526s. At that time, as 526s, and now it's I-526Es. I've continued working with my own practice, and now my clients hail from the 6 continents, and they're looking to build a new future in America. So that's my history with the program. I have great faith in it, and I know that it works. I've seen it working, and I'm very happy to bring the message to our listeners today.
That's great, and can't wait to hear more about your perspective and your experience, especially having spent so many years in Guangzhou, which is central to the EB-5 program. So Gary, maybe to kick us off here, I know you both shared an experience here where you were abroad overseas, interfacing directly with potential EB-5 investors. And I think over here in the US, we hear about market developments, but how's it really looking overseas as we get closer to some of the key deadlines?
Thanks, Chris, and good to see you, Benjamin. It was a real pleasure to travel with you, and I appreciate your time and all the effort that you went into joining us for the trip. You know, Chris, we continue to see a strong market in China. You know, every city we went to and presented at, you know, dozens of investors joining us. I think we're starting to see an increasingly savvy potential investor pool in China. They know the program quite well. I think they have friends or relatives who've used the program to immigrate. And so you end up with, I think, you know, a sophisticated set of questions and an interest in the program.
That's great to hear. You know, the market is much more sophisticated. I think 10 years ago, it was completely different. But even a couple of years ago, when we're talking to investors, we go right into the deeper issues of what's possible within EB-5 with the current framework, but also what are some of the challenges and pitfalls. Benjamin, did you have a similar perspective as you were meeting and talking with people face to face this round?
Oh, thank you, Chris. Yes, absolutely 100% to support Gary's observation about the China market. It is a mature market, and the entrepreneurs and the potential investors are very experienced now with EB-5. They discuss amongst themselves. There's a very lively marketplace of ideas and exchange of ideas and exchange of experiences with it. There are people who have relatives, friends, colleagues who've been through the process and say it really worked for us. It gave us a solution. And unfortunately, there are also people who have had negative experiences with the program. Moreover, the China market is experienced. They know they have options. They're looking at other Anglophone societies, other Anglophone countries that have their own immigration and maybe investment immigration programs, New Zealand, Australia, the UK, and other English-speaking countries. So they have choices. And it is incumbent on us, for those investors who decide that their life wants to be in America, to help them find the best pathway, the best journey to start that immigration process for them.
And let me pick up on that point if I could, because I do think we heard concerns about what's happening in America in terms of immigration, stepped up enforcement, some concern about anti-Chinese sentiment, perhaps at this moment in America. But I think overall, the investors really do want to immigrate to America first and foremost. Australia, uh, other countries may be considerations for them, but America, they know, I think remains the place where they want to have their children educated, the best place to start a business. It remains a land of hope and dreams. And I thought that message came through pretty clearly from the potential investors as well.
That's good to hear. And we just actually finished up here in Irvine, California, where we're headquartered, Irvine Tech Day, which is startups and entrepreneurs coming together to launch their dream business here in the United States. And within that crowd, there is a lot of first generation immigrants. And I was talking to some of the people there, and it's still very unique in that the US market supports the ability to come here and really start the American dream just as it always has. And I think that demand is still pretty strong. So it's so good to hear that, Gary. And it is an important consideration that I think is sometimes missed within EB-5 is there are other options around the world for global migration. And so it is important that we make sure that we articulate that the American dream is still alive and well. And I too truly believe that. So switching gears, and speaking of choices, right, even with EB-5, there's a lot of different choices, and a lot of the talk lately has dominated the rural versus HUA debate. Did that happen to, I see you both nodding your heads, so that must have come up in the conversations. Definitely interested to get either of your takes on that.
Certainly. Well, there has been greater consideration of rural versus the HUAs. Obviously, the high unemployment areas were dominant before the Reform and Integrity Act. There seemed to be a perception among the market that if the project was located in a higher population area, then it seemed to allay some fears of the investors. But the rurals really are coming into force now. First of all, the directive has come from on high, from the DHS on downwards, and expressed through USCIS that rural projects, rural petitions should be adjudicated faster. We are seeing that come out in the actual adjudication times. But also for the China market, I think that there is nuance to it as well. The faster adjudication of the rural I-526Es may be a non-issue. It may be irrelevant ultimately to the overall strategy of the case. If somebody is from a nation where they consider a possible waiting list appearing, and if they're in a situation where they want to maximize the leniency of a child who's nearing the age of 21, then they actually want a nice long I-526E processing time. So there's other factors they might want to consider that a rural I-526E with a quicker processing time may not be what is strategically best for them, even though it would potentially give them greater peace of mind with a faster approval. But you might want to consider speaking with an immigration attorney about what that means for the Children and the Child Status Protection Act.
Yeah, I agree completely. We saw, I think, that the market is very focused on rural right now, and it's because of the priority processing. And it's good to see that USCIS is carrying out the statutory mandate to prioritize petitions for rural projects. And it's driven investments into rural areas, as Benjamin said, and it's very different from the pre-RIA, New York City and other gateway projects that we saw. But I think the market is gone a little bit too far because there is a place for HUA projects, for high unemployment area projects. As Benjamin pointed out, the protection for children, teenage children who could be in danger of aging out, of reaching 21 years of age and no longer being eligible under the parent petition, the parents' petition. So I think this is, it's a tough question. It requires some strategic thinking beyond what's going to be the fastest, petition approval. And I would really encourage any potential investor to sit with an immigration attorney like Benjamin and go through the various permutations and what it could look like and make the best decision for themselves and their families.
I think that's great insight. And, something that you both hit on, which is extremely important, I think, to recognize is that EB-5 is a journey, and it's a journey that is not traveled alone. You have to have the right partners at the table. And I think the sooner that you're able to build your team, the better position you'll be in to move forward. Along those lines, Were there any major concerns that you were hearing on a continual basis overseas, maybe worries about source of funds outside of the politics at the moment, but worries about what might be holding people up from moving forward?
Yes, I can feel that one. I know that immigration is constantly iterating in how it reviews cases. For example, the entire industry has seen that immigration has taken a hardline stance against loans that are generated from organizations related to the regional centers. After a period of even approving those cases and issuing conditional green cards to sources of funds that use those sorts of loans, immigration then started to deny cases and even chase back and take back the green cards previously issued. So quite a few questions focus on what do you think immigration wants right now? Can you predict, if you have a crystal ball, what immigration will want in the future? Besides that, I think Gary would agree, a lot of verbalized concerns and anxiety about project reliability, about source of funds return, and then also underlying everything about their children's future, whether it's that their child is close to an age out, so maybe they want to consider a separate EB-5 for the child, or auxiliary services, like if we come to the US and get conditional green cards, do you know people who could help our children study well in school and have these auxiliary services to help them start that US life?
That's great. And that's what I love about EB-5 is the cross-cultural exchange. We're talking about China here, of course, but it's really worldwide. And so you really get exposure to the lives and the desires of people from all around the world. That being said, was there anything on this trip, and I know you've been back and forth many times, Benjamin, anything that really surprised you this trip?
Now, I'd like to revisit point one, the first question you asked us about the market, and that is that people in China, the potential investors, they're now well informed. They're very well informed. They're very savvy. They're very analytical. I do recall I went across the border to Hong Kong to attend the Immigration and Property Exposition in mid-April. And there were people there who were talking with me about immigrating to the US. They start asking a question about a category, some category. I would start explaining it to them, and they would finish my explanation for me and
Really?
say, yes, we know. And then they would say, well, here are my facts. How do you think that category applies for me? Okay, a different category, family. Well, let me tell you. Oh, yes, we know. Here we go. Let me tell you about investment immigration. Oh, yes, we know. How about my facts? So I think the days when you have to start from step zero, ground zero, and build up the explanation, I think those are over. They have information at their fingertips. What they need to know is like the most recent developments, the latest projects to hit the market, the latest adjudications from USCIS. And as professionals in that space, it's incumbent on us to give them that sort of latest information.
Really interesting. And I think in a way, it's more challenging, right? Because you have to jump right into the issues at the outset. But I think when you look at the overall journey that we've been describing, it's better to really take care of those issues up front so that as you're presenting your immigration package to the US government, you're actually addressing things right off the bat as opposed to waiting and going back and forth through communication with the government. How about you, Gary? Anything jump out this time that's sort of a little bit different even than maybe the last trip, which was, I know, just maybe 6 months ago?
Well, I would say this, I didn't know Benjamin well before the trip. We connected through Ishan Khanna, who is an EB-5 immigrant himself and has started an organization dedicated to educating and advocating on behalf of investors. And so we really took that prism with us through the trip, thinking about things through the lens of the investor. And Benjamin graciously serving as my linguistical interpreter, but was also a cultural interpreter, also a force multiplier in terms of being an immigration expert who could talk to potential investors. And so, it can be an intense time, demanding being on the road and
Sure.
the time change, but just really a great experience.
So we're getting close to the home stretch here, and I know it seems like we're just warming up, but I thought as we have a lot of investors who are really thinking about, do I need to make this decision before the grandfathering date? If so, I've only got a few months to really pull it together here. What's one piece of advice, putting your lawyer's hat on, that you would give to someone in that position? Benjamin, maybe we'll start with you.
So the starting point is very important. There are some categories you might be able to throw together like a skeletal petition and then give it to USCIS and then kind of supplement it as you go along. With EB-5, you really want to find a project that you believe in, and you want to find a good immigration attorney who can look at all aspects of your planned journey to the USA. Are you thinking about coming to the US on another non-immigrant status and then perhaps adjusting status? Is it most important for your family to be here now as soon as possible and start your American journey? Or are you taking care of business in multiple countries? Are you looking at this as a future investment? And when time is right, you can come here in future. Would you want your children to finish their education at home first and then come to the USA? So make sure that you disclose everything to an immigration attorney that you trust, who's competent, and they can help plan everything for you. And then you'll be off to a strong start to begin with. I dare say that the EB-5, especially the regional center petition, the I-526E, is something I've never heard of anybody filing for themselves successfully. Yeah. There are other categories you think, well, I did it myself and they approved it. I would say that the EB-5 has so many moving parts and it's such a complex structure, economically, fiscally, job creating, legally, that you really want to have a trusted guide to help you navigate that journey.
Gary, how about you? What would be some advice that you would give to someone who's really, staring down that grandfathering date?
Well, I think Benjamin heard me say this every time we spoke to potential investors because I feel so strongly about it. We have these looming deadlines. There's, September 30th, 2026. Petitions filed before that date are grandfathered in. They'll move forward no matter what happens with the program. We have January 2027 when the minimum investment level will move up from 800,000 to 900,000 or 950,000. We think are the most likely potential levels. And we have the concern of cutoff dates for the reserve categories for rural, for China, probably being the first one to expect. But what I always say is you can't make a decision to immigrate based on these milestones. It's just too big a decision in terms of uprooting your family, moving countries, a new language, new culture. But once you've made that decision to immigrate through the EB-5 program, do not delay. Move quickly to retain an immigration lawyer, to begin the source of funds work, and take advantage of this window we have right now.
Well, gentlemen, I think that's great advice. And, what I'm hearing is get yourself a guide right away, as soon as possible, if you're planning to go on this journey. I think it's really great advice for anyone thinking of moving forward within the EB-5 program. That being said, we thank you for joining us and we look forward to speaking with you again.